Night Owls of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing that happened to you when everyone else was sleeping? This is a collection of stuff. If you believe in paranormal things, then you may have heard of a rainbow vortex. It's a place where spirits gather to move on essentially. My house is located right at the edge of one of these. There's almost always something between the times of 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., it's 2:40 a.m. RN. Usually small things like objects rattling or sliding or footsteps, etc. I've gotten used to these by now. The weird things are sometimes the hallway will just flash bright light for no reason, think silent lightning, and no apparent source. I've only seen that twice. My desk now faces away from the door. The other creepiest thing is that my old laptop, which was 8 years old, had a battery life of about 5 minutes idle. Remember this? I had recently done a factory reset on it so we could e-cycle it later. It had been setting on the kitchen table for about a week and I had set it to mute and left it there to die. One day, at 2ish am, the computer starts the setup sequence for Windows on full volume. I go out there to see what's going on and actually got the audio on a video. I opened the case and it shut off immediately. I tried to power it on and I couldn't, as it had ran out of battery almost 6 days ago. TLDR. Random paranormal things and a dead laptop speaking to me. Few more random paranormal things here. Not super late either. One time I was trying to sleep when I heard footsteps in my room. I figured it was my cat, even though they sounded weird, so I called her name. She would then usually meow back the jump on my bed and commence suffocating me by laying across my face. But instead, the steps back out of my room and I hear a solid on the wood floor and no more. Another time, I was out trying to find our outdoor cat who had gotten lost in the night so I could lock him in the barn at night. I figured he got locked in the garage. So I went in to find him, he wasn't in there. When I was searching, I happened in front of the gym door at the back of the garage. While there I stepped on a moth and hit my foot on the door. After just having watched a horror movie, the first thought in my head was, wouldn't it be funny if something knocked back? And my dismay, something knocked back from the back left corner of the gym, where a few days before my mom said stuff had been falling off the walls that hadn't been touched in months. It was just 3 short knocks, but I got out of there fast. And it didn't help that I heard them again on the wall outside. And it doesn't help that a few weeks before my mom and sister were scared back inside when they heard a solid knock on the garage door when they were walking past it, so I had to go out and do what they wanted, and I heard it too. For those of you wondering, the cat was already in the barn. TLDR, footsteps in my room, knocking in garage. Last one, I swear. I was out walking around a park at 11:30 p.m.ish with a friend, cause that's what we do, and when we got to the end of our walk we were just sitting there, cause why not, when a white car drives by and screeches to a halt. The driver rolls down his window and yells, "Hey kids. Want some green chili?" We say no, it's good chili. It's only $5. No thank you. Then the back window rolls down and another guy leans out, "You sure you don't want the chili?" No. And lo and behold, the driver actually grabs a styrofoam cup full of green chili and tries to sell it on us. After a few more minutes or not buying chili, they drove off saying your loss. TLDR, guys try to sell me $5 green chili at 11:30 p.m. in a park. This may be the longest response on this thread. If you read this whole thing, I applaud you for persistence and you get a cookie. Used to live with my ex in a house where something did not like me. It got to the point where every single time I fell asleep downstairs, where his room was, I had sleep paralysis. One time we were cuddling and he fell asleep before I did and I started hearing growls and stuff. At this point this was fairly commonplace, so I tired to just ignore it and fall asleep. When I finally did, I had a horrible nightmare that something was pulling me into the closet and beating me. I woke up to sleep paralysis and heard a deep gravelly voice say, "Come here, sweetheart," from the closet. I stopped sleeping down there after several experiences of seeing things down there while I was sure I was awake too, but that was fucking terrifying because I felt so helpless. Another time more recently, I was in Texas visiting my grandma and everyone was asleep. It was very early in the morning, like 4 a.m., before I finally asleep. After seemingly just a few minutes I woke up to my toddler son saying, "No," really loudly and forcefully. Look over and he's still asleep. Look back to my right and there is the shadow of a man standing a few feet away from me. I couldn't see well because it was dark, but there was clearly someone in the room. I got confused for a minute and said, "Dad," thinking maybe he came in for some reason, but then the figure didn't move or say anything and I realized it wasn't him. I freaked out and reached to turn on the extremely bright night light and when I turned back it was gone. I fucking hated sleeping there the rest of the time. To make it even worse, I was telling my sister about it and she was like, "Oh yeah, I saw him the first night we were here." Apparently she was reading in bed and turned over and he was standing over her bed. My family has always been sensitive to this stuff, and my sister most of all, so she didn't mention it until I told her about what I saw. I've been kind of on the fence for most of my life about these experiences, but that put a bullet through the head of me not believing in the supernatural anymore. When I was 10 to 12 years old, I was sitting in my bedroom at, like, 3 a.m. No one was awake, I didn't have school the next day, and there wasn't any traffic. I hear a knocking sound from my window, so I look at my window. There wasn't anyone there, so I went back to playing my video games. I'd say about 30 minutes later, I heard the knocking again. I look at my window, again, and guess what? No one was there. I ignore it again, and go back to playing video games. About an hour or so later, I get up to take a piss. A little context for the next part: my bathroom is a little weird, there's a window right above the toilet with no curtains or blinds. I hear my dogs barking, all three of them, and I look out the window into the backyard to see a man, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, walking up to my bedroom window. He looks up into the window, I guess seeing the bathroom light on, sees me and sprints off into the woods. This isn't actually the creepiest thing I've had happen to me. I'm very prone to having paranormal/weird stuff happen to me for some reason. But this story was what popped into my head. TLDR, was up at around 3 a.m., weird dude was knocking on my window. So I once stayed up late and I heard what sounded like a dog barking whilst being strangled. It kept getting louder and closer until it became quiet, and this is where it was in front of my house. I looked at the CCTV and I saw this very thin, silver figure running around the drive. The motion sensor light never came on. This thing had no arms or head, just had a thin body and thin legs. I turned my phone off. 5 minutes later the barking started again as the thing moved further away. I always have my window open at night because of California heat, and one night at around 2 a.m. a sketchy white car parked in front of my house. No one got out, no one got in, and it left about an hour later. Nothing really happened, but the fact that I've seen it around the neighborhood multiple times, and I know they don't live here or anything because my town/neighborhood is very small, freaks me out a lot. The windows are tinted very darkly, and I know it is the same car because of the license plate, so I never really could see who was inside. Still freaks me out a bit when I see it around. Kind of a funny one, but freaked me out when it happened. Was up playing Sly 3 one night at my parents' house. This was on the second floor in a room that connects to the upper deck. My parents have cameras and lights that go off when something was moving in the backyard to give you an idea. So anyway, I'm playing the game when I hear heavy steps and the deck, some of which sounded like it had claws. I noticed that the lights hadn't been triggered, so my first thought was, what the hell is that, and how did it get up here without triggering the lights? So being the brave person I am, I turned on the lights of the room I was in and opened the curtains to the door that leads to the deck. Lo and behold, my sister's dog is there staring at me through the glass doors. Apparently my parents let the dog out earlier that evening and didn't bother to tell anyone. The dog had just gotten uncomfortable and was pacing the deck wanting to come back in. Let her in the house and it never happened again. It was about 11 p.m., and my friends wanted to FaceTime since I hadn't been in school for a few days. Since I share a room with my sister and she was asleep, I decided to go downstairs as to not wake her. I was in our living room, and had probably been down there for about 30 minutes when I started to hear scratching from the front door, and my Alexa started responding to random things that I wasn't even saying, setting alarms when I hadn't mentioned times or anything, Googling things that I hadn't mentioned. I turned off the Alexa and checked the front door was locked. I stayed on the call with my friends until about 12:30 a.m. and then went back upstairs. To get back upstairs I had to walk past the kitchen, which always gives me the creeps, and I glanced in and swear I could have seen a black figure standing by the shelves in the corner. I thought maybe it was nothing and I was just seeing things because I was tired and paranoid from earlier, but still hurried upstairs anyway. I got back upstairs and was surprised to see, what I assumed was, my sister sitting up in her bed in the dark. I kept the light off as I presumed my sister was still half asleep and it wouldn't be fair to wake her up completely. I talked to her and was confused that she just sat there, unresponsive, but reasoned she may have earplugs in. The whole time I was changing into pajamas she sat, a dark figure on her bed. I climbed into my bed and as I did so, my sister walked through our bedroom door. I freaked out completely. For the past 10 to 15 minutes something had been on her bed, a dark sort of figure/mass had just sat there whilst I got changed and got ready for bed. My sister called me delusional and said I was imagining things due to drowsiness, but I know that wasn't the case. I still freak out when I see shadows on her side of the room when she's not there, and I can't help but think maybe the scratching and the Alexa and the shadow downstairs are all sorta connected. It hasn't happened since though, so I really don't know what to think. I've had many years of third shift jobs, which I always wind up in out of desperation, then remember why. I had a guy in a Dodge Charger follow me from the west side of Indy to the area I lived in on the south side. There was about 10 minutes I thought it was a cop pacing me to pull me over for speeding. Fair enough, it was an empty interstate at 5 a.m., I was going a bit fast. But it lasted to my exit. Then almost to my neighborhood. I ended up taking multiple turns and did not go home. The cops that normal hung out at the DD connected to a nearby gas station weren't there that day. Why, I don't know. Eventually he sped off. I work third shift grocery and retail currently. We aren't allowing shoppers overnights currently, but before the pandemic we'd routinely have shoplifters and people whacked out on drugs, alcohol, or fucked up because they were off their meds come in. We usually call the cops once or twice per Friday or Saturday night. This ranges from angry yelling, destruction, threats, and people sticking items in their snatches. It has happened twice. At one point in time I also did a newspaper ad stuffing side gig. I'd get out at the same time as the bars. If I stopped to grab something from the gas station on the way home, there would always be some drunk dude in a parking lot yelling insults at another drunk. Another point, I watched a cop bust a man pissing behind a building. 2 women in a hair-pulling fight. An old man getting angry about the lack of hot dogs. Weirdness. The feeling of someone standing behind me. I can't always wear headphones because I feel something and I'm worried I won't hear it. In my bathroom, I thought a cat had brushed against my leg when I was alone. I even saw something dark low to the ground. I spun around and turned on the light. No cat. I'm always alone, it's always at night, a dark figure. My dad is dead and my hand was on his chest when he died. He was a real asshole about pranks in life, so I try to reassure myself it's him. The night before I moved, back in the beginnings of 2018, I slept in my room one last time. It was only me, as me and my sister shared rooms, but she was at the other house with my grandma as she was preparing the house. I fell asleep at around 10 to 11 p.m. I wake up at around 3 a.m. to witness a shadow walking away from the room and into the hallway. As I begin to regain my conscience, I jumped out of my bed and saw nobody. This was definitely one of the creepiest moments in my life. Edit. I forgot to mention that I sometimes have nightmares or unpleasant dreams of my old house from time to time. A couple of years ago I lived in another town. We had a German Shepherd dog called Smiley. He was a big, relatively scary dog. He was laying outside on our porch. I was laying on the couch watching TV. This happened around 1 or 2 a.m., but it's really quiet with the exception of the TV, when all of a sudden I hear Smiley start barking. I just thought it was a cat or something. Well, he stopped barking when I heard something climb onto the porch. It hissed, and swear to God our scary tough German Shepherd starts crying, or the dog equivalent YK. Well, safe to say I was scared shitless. We lived nowhere near any wildlife or anything with the potential to scare a dog like ours, so that's out of the equation. I only heard it that one night tough, and I rarely slept in our living room or next to my bedroom window for as long as we lived there. Was watching television really late one night, around 2 a.m. or so. My roommate worked an early morning job and had to be at work at 6 a.m., so he usually went to bed at 10 p.m. Now the TV is up against a wall that has an archway into our kitchen on the right of the TV. My roommate's room is directly behind me, behind the couch. It's in the middle of the living room. The other door in the kitchen connects to our garage, so you can imagine my surprise when I see my roommate walk out of the kitchen and right past me. I say, "Why are you awake?" as I turn my head and realize I'm completely alone in the living room, with all the lights on. No clue what that was, but I didn't sleep that night. Going to bed late one night around 3 a.m., and I go to shut off the light over the sink in the kitchen. The sink sits under a window that looks out into my backyard, and into a wooded area beyond the fence. I see 2 small red lights hovering just beyond the fence, directly in my line of sight. I'm instantly creeped the hell out. Our kitchen has been remodeled recently, and the new way the electronics are positioned in the kitchen/dining room area, the lights on them will oftentimes reflect on the glass of the kitchen window when I go to turn off that light. But the lights on the TV and router and other miscellaneous lights are green or white, not red. I consciously knew that, but I still tried to explain it away. Then they proceeded to disappear after a couple of minutes of trying to figure out what they were. Fast forward about 5 weeks deep in the throes of quarantine, and my husband points out a drone in our backyard, just beyond the fence in the woods, and it has 2 red lights on it. Motherfucker. And it turns out he saw the lights months before I did, around 5 a.m. one morning on his way to work. He also thought it was a reflection of the TV. I didn't confront the person controlling the drone because I didn't make the connection until after they were gone. I was thinking about how uncomfortable it made me feel. How watched I felt. There's a hike and bike trail directly behind the fence that is very popular, so I figured it was kids messing around, but at 3 a.m. and the 5 am? No thanks. And if I see that damn drone again, I'm coming after it with a bat.